2 weeks ago, when I last made a video on Cardano, it was trading about $1.15. In that video, we discussed the possibilities of where Cardano could be headed in the short, medium, and long term based on its previous price action, and more specifically, what happened the previous cycle. Ultimately, I stated my opinion, and that was most likely I thought we would come back down to this trend line that we saw last cycle and potentially wick lower. We might need to also alter it depending on where we get our low, but most likely we would see some kind of a pretty strong correction. It's now, of course, 2 weeks later, and we did get that strong correction. We're currently trading at 95 cents, but we wicked down as low as 85 cents, a 30-cent price decrease from when I made that video. Now today we're going to talk about where Cardano could be headed now that we've had this next installment play out and what it means. A few key differences that I've made this video very small, but definitely worth taking note of. Last video we compared what happened before the halving to what happened this cycle before and during and after the halving. In my opinion, I thought these were, I'll zoom out so we can see both on the screen. In my opinion, I thought what we got here was more or less the exact same as what we got here. Now, one thing I have changed from that chart is the COVID rally. Here we can see we got a low after we got our higher high. Sorry, I'll start again. We start off at a low, we get a high, we get a higher high approximately 12 weeks later, which is important. Then we get a low, and then we got our COVID rally, followed by our COVID sell-off. And then we went in and started our bull run, and Cardano put in a higher high after the halving, came back to a low and traded up. And basically that's where I thought we were currently in the cycle, and that we were most likely going to follow this trend line up and hopefully soon see some kind of a strong bull move like we did previously. The differences here is before I had this blue labeled as a question mark, and I proposed the question, is the high that we're currently at, is that equivalent to the pre-COVID rally where we then got a sell-off? Or do we ignore all the COVID stuff and basically say this is the high that came after? So here we can see we got 1 rally, 2 rally, 3 rally, and I was putting the question forward, this was the first rally. Did we count this as the second rally, or are we mapping this to the third rally? In my opinion, I think it's the third rally. And again, we came to this conclusion in the video just because we can see the amount of time from the low before the COVID rally to the low after the COVID rally is exactly the same, or by 1 week. But if you zoom in here, you can see these lows. It could be either week realistically, depending on the exchange you visit. And here we just didn't get the volatility. We didn't go up and we didn't go down. We just traded sideways. But the same amount of time passed for us to get that rally up from when we got this first low that I'm mapping to. Again, I chose not to include this first kind of hump, even though we did see very similar things like the first more noticeable lower high, then the second higher high, then the retracement, then the little wick up, then the sell-off, which is again very similar to what we saw back in 2019. Also, the time durations are eerily similar. Here it took 66 weeks from the start of this rally to the end where we got the post-COVID low, or the COVID low before the money printers turned on. Here it's been 60 weeks, so again, very similar timeframes. One thing that I would like to point out is in the last video, we did speak about how long we might have to wait before we see Cardano get a rally, a proper bull run move, like we saw back in 2021. And what I pointed out before was that between all of these highs and then higher high moves that we've seen Cardano do, and it's done a lot of them, they've all lasted about 12 weeks. We can see this first one, obviously, back in 2019, 12 weeks from peak to peak. If we zoom in here in 2023, the beginning of 2023, we got a first high, then a second higher high. It was 11 weeks later. Again, depending on the exchange, you could round it up to 12. It really doesn't matter. It's basically the same time frame. Again, here, 2024, end of 2023, we get our high, and then 12 weeks later, we then put in a higher high. So I, of course, mapped this over and said we could potentially see this play out. We could see 12 weeks, which would put you end of February when we see this higher high. But then that also kind of concedes the point that we're going to get a strong pullback once we get this higher high, which is obviously not what we want. But I foolishly kind of ignored the time frame. You know, I in that video, I left it as a question, whether we were having this rally or whether we were having this rally. but I didn't pull up the time frame that it took last cycle after we had this third high. And here it took 18 weeks for Cardano to break above that price that it was previously at. Now, if we wait 18 weeks longer, that puts you at the beginning of April when you break above this previous high that Cardano was at. And the wick brings you up to $1.30. Now, if you want to take it from the close, that's much easier to beat at $1.20, but that still translates to a 25-cent increase in Cardano's price, which is close to a 33% move at the moment, just under somewhere around 28, 27% probably, but still quite a big move for Cardano. However, I'm not saying that's unrealistic. In fact, I think it's the more probable outcome compared to the 12 weeks, because as we've seen in America on Wednesday, they have chose to continue their quantitative tightening. They haven't reduced rates again. I've said this for years. I think we need the environment for crypto. The monetary environment needs to be good for crypto to do well. And while crypto has done well this last year, altcoins haven't done well, really. They've done some really great moves, but Bitcoin has outpaced basically all of them, excluding Solana and, a few meme coins, but I'm not counting them. Bitcoin, if you measure it from the lows, is outpacing most of them. And if you pull up their Bitcoin charts, a lot of them are bleeding. They've had a few rallies, they've had a few bounces, but ultimately they've been trending down on their Bitcoin pair. And I don't think we'll see that change until we see the world's reserve currency / government change its monetary policy. So I think that extended timeline of 18 weeks instead of 12 is much more favorable, that the Fed will more likely do something within that time frame. Again, 12 weeks later puts us at the end of February. That's one more meeting basically that the Fed have to decide to change rates. And realistically, that's what I think it will take for us to see some kind of improvement in the crypto space that will really bring us higher. I think we need the end of quantitative tightening, or we need more rate cuts. I think with this 18 weeks, we get 2 more meetings within that time. I think likely one of those will happen. And again, the question that everyone wonders, where could Cardano be headed? And again, if there's a lot of ways of measuring, I'm going to be very quick and very basic with this. If we're taking from the peak here that I think we're currently at, this peak, if we take it from that close up to the high for Cardano, it was a 2000% move. I always say this, you should expect diminishing returns from cycle to cycle. Cardano is no exception. Again, in 2017, Cardano did actually get the bull run, because the bull run was at the very end of 2017, unlike 2021. 2021, it was at the start of the year when we got this bull run. 2017, it was December when we got this bull run. November, basically. So we can measure actually how far Cardano moved. And from the low to the high of that bull run, Cardano made a 6,000% move, give or take, depending on the exchange, depending on where you want to call the low. Here, a lot of people would argue the bull run took place in 2021. I would agree with them, even though we did see substantial gains before that, when we had just up only movement basically for multiple months. Cardano moved 3,000%, so we got half of what we got the cycle before. If, again, we're measuring from purple here, if you want to say, okay, we got 3,000% of a move last time from purple to the peak, if we take 1,500% of a move, where does that take us? I don't know if I'll be able to fit this on the graph. I won't, in fact, so I'm going to shrink this. 1,500% of a move. Yeah, and I can't fit it. 1,500% of a move puts you somewhere around $13, close to $14. That is a huge amount to move. And just because we can argue there's some kind of a pattern here of half the price movement from that bull run, does not mean that's going to translate to here. That is such 2 points is not a pattern, in my opinion. That's very loose. So I don't want you to go away with the idea that, okay, we're going to see a 1,500% move. That's not going to happen. Or, well, it might. I'm not saying it's a definite. I'm not saying it has to happen. In my opinion, I think we'll probably come closer to $5 at our peak, which again, if you want to measure from current price, or we can measure from pink. If we go up to $5, that gives you about a 500% move, 550%. I think that's quite reasonable. I think that's quite good. It's over a 5x. That's a lot of money being made on an altcoin that's in the top 10. I would definitely not be complaining over that at all. Again, I just think we need these other things to happen first, whether that's quantitative easing, or at least the end of quantitative tightening, or at least some kind of decent rate cut. Either way, that does it for the US dollar pair. There's not too much to go over. Bitcoin pair, similar story. In the last video, again, we compared where we currently are to where we were in the previous cycle, how we saw similar but diminished moves in terms of percentage and time frame. But what was interesting was for the Bitcoin pair, a lot of these times didn't really add up properly until we started measuring from the Bitcoin pair. And when we got this rally on the Bitcoin pair, it was 32 weeks after the halving. And if we go to where we got, the big rally that injected a bit of hope back into the crypto space, a lot of people were pretty not distraught, but fed up, done with it. There was no energy, basically. We got these big pumps, and that was 28 weeks after the halving. Now, again, that would kind of indicate that we're at the start of the bull run. And it is quite interesting. In that previous video, I mapped it to the one that we got just after the halving. But if you map it to the one that's more time-based accurate, it actually looks very similar. The move that we got here, where we got this strong move up and then a bit of a capitulation and a double bottom, it's kind of similar to what we saw after we got this strong move up. We got this strong move up and we didn't get a double bottom, but we came close to getting one on a wick. And then we went in and continued higher. Now, of course, you'll notice this is at a much lower stage than Cardano. And I haven't actually prepped this, but I just want to see, do these line up? They sort of do. Sorry, I didn't prepare that. I just wanted to see what it looked like. I might explore something like that in the future. But it is much lower, obviously, than where we were back in January of 2021. And again, I think that's to be expected. I think as cycles go on, Cardano will diminish in terms of its gains, not only on its US dollar pair, but also against Bitcoin. And we've seen this from the first cycle, like we saw on the US dollar pair. Cardano peaked out last cycle at 6,000 sats. The first cycle, it went close to 9,000 sats. So again, there's a diminish. If you want to take that very basic, very linear approach, and we can see there's a difference of 3,000 sats here between each peak, you can argue 3,000 sats is where we might peak out this cycle. That's where I've spoken a lot about where I think Cardano enters extremely, extremely, extremely overbought territory. And I won't be holding Cardano once it goes over that 3,000 sat range. Whether that's the case or not, I don't know. Again, that's a very, very, very simple way of looking at things, and markets are anything but simple. It is just interesting to see where we could be. And again, if you measure if we compare to this move, which was basically the start of the bull run, we'll go from wick open to wick close. It was a 400% of a move. What have we got on here? 200% of a move. Now that is wick to wick, to be fair. So let's actually even the playing field. Go wick to wick. You're getting 550% of a move. So you're closer to a third here actually of what we got last cycle if this is the equivalent move. How long would we have to wait potentially if it's going to follow the Bitcoin pair again? How long do we have to wait after this peak before we saw a rally? Before it overtook the price that it was at before? Well, let me just pull up the date range here. It was 10 weeks later when we broke above. That maps more to the 12 weeks that we saw on the US dollar chart. However, if it's more like this halving move, we could be waiting much longer than 18 weeks before we get this low. And again, going further out than 18 weeks, you could be looking at, what we saw in 2017 where we got the bull run at the end of the year. At the very end of the year, instead of 2021, where January, first thing all altcoins did was rally up a stupid amount against Bitcoin. They went even further on their US dollar pair. I think maybe a lot of people were expecting that. I think that was always a certainty in their mind. And now that it hasn't happened, it's really shaken the crypto space. But again, we are 1 month into the post-halving year. We've got a very long time to put in higher highs, and I think we will do that. And again, just to go back to this kind of diminishing returns, if you do expect Cardano to go back to 3,000 sats, you're basically saying that you expect it to outperform Bitcoin by 3x. If you expect Bitcoin to do a 2x, you expect Cardano to do a 6x. That puts Cardano at around $6. And if you remember on the US dollar chart, we spoke about $5.50, $5 being where it could reasonably top out based on previous moves. But again, very flimsy assumptions. I don't have all the answers. I'm just comparing what's happening now to what's happened before. I of course have my own opinions and I hold Cardano, I want it to do well, but everything in this video, aside from when I say in my opinion, is a fact. Whether I want it to be a fact or whether I wanted that fact to have happened is irrelevant. I'm just displaying what's happened. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for the video today. If you did like the video, please leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike too. That is totally fine. Comment down below if you agree or disagree with me, or maybe what altcoin you want me to see cover next. Thanks so much for watching until the end, guys. Take care and peace.